Welcome into the debut episode of the New England Sports Report right here on LCAT. I'm Anthony Santaniello, joined by my partner in crime, Matt Durant. Matt, what's going on?
Not much, Anthony. How you doing?
Doing well. We obviously have a lot to get into today. We're going to be talking about the New England Patriots, their post-Super Bowl loss, and the Josh McDaniels news. We're going to talk about the Boston Red Sox free agency spending, if you will, trying to spend some time getting to JD Martinez and other free agents. And then we'll hit on the Boston Bruins and Boston Celtics, both second place in the Eastern Conference, doing a very good job this season. But first, let's start with the New England Patriots and obviously the tough loss to the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, 41-33. Looked like everything was downhill for a little bit, and then Tuesday evening, Pats fans got a break of good news with Josh McDaniels staying with the New England Patriots.
Yeah, it was a weird situation. He commits to the Colts, and it's a big thing when you're a head coach or trying to become a head coach, and you give a team your word. It's kind of a reputation thing moving forward, and he decides to stay with the New England Patriots. They're talking about, I guess, Belichick sweetened the deal, so for the future he's going to learn about the scouting, learn a little bit more about the player personnel decisions that he makes, so that it seems like McDaniels will be the next head coach of the Patriots whenever it is Bill exits. But when you give your word to a team, especially like the Colts, who don't have the best relationship with the Patriots as is, and you renege on that decision, I mean it means different things for the Patriots than it does for McDaniels' future. But it was definitely a shocker that dropped during a time when it seemed like the NFL season was behind us. We were moving towards the NBA, trade deadline and all that stuff, and then McDaniels makes his big decision. It definitely shocked. It shocked a lot of people.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And, you look at the timeline of how everything went down. It seemed like Monday, Colts were having, talks with McDaniels, making sure everything was all good. And then Tuesday morning, they tweet out that Josh McDaniels is officially the head coach of the Colts, and his press conference will be Wednesday afternoon. And then somehow between Tuesday morning and Tuesday night, Bill Belichick met with Josh McDaniels and, like you said, told him about learning how to create salary cap space and work the roster to be more of the GM. So it seems like they are grooming him for the head coaching position. And I think rumors came out also that Robert Kraft was trying to screw the Indianapolis Colts for everything that happened in Deflategate in the past with those two teams. But I really don't think it comes down to that. I think it's just a matter of the Patriots didn't realize that McDaniels was that serious about taking the Indianapolis job, and then it came down to, wow, he actually is going to leave, so we need to do everything we can to keep him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a smart decision by Kraft and Belichick to sweeten the pot, as they said, to get McDaniels back, because it at one point was looking like, all right, you just lost the Super Bowl. Now you're going to lose your offensive coordinator. You're going to lose Joe Judge from special teams, who was supposed to potentially go to the Colts with McDaniels. A couple other assistant coaches, wide receiver coaches, things like that. And Patricia would go to Detroit. Now you have a little bit less of an issue filling those slots. Belichick's already a great defensive coach, so he'll have no problem finding a guy that he can groom in the DC position. But if you were to lose McDaniels and Patricia, it would mean a whole lot more for your franchise, especially because you know that Brady's offense is heavily tied to the way McDaniels runs things. Now you're in a bit of a better position. You have less slots to fill as far as coaching goes. Brady comes back at 41 and is now looking to make another run with the guys he's familiar with. He doesn't have to shake anything up. And now the Pats are in a bit more stable of a spot than we expected, which I think is especially good considering the Super Bowl loss. Now they have just less to focus on in the offseason.
And one thing I think they might have to focus on is the upcoming NFL draft. And now that McDaniels is assuming that role of being the future Bill Belichick and the future head coach of the New England Patriots, do the Patriots draft a quarterback early enough to compare to Jimmy Garoppolo, where he was a second-round pick, and say this guy is the actual future of our franchise and the guy that McDaniels wants to work with the most in the future? I've been seeing a lot of people saying that Luke Falk from Washington State could be the guy that they draft, and a big pocket passer, not really mobile, but has a big arm and can certainly work with the Patriots offense. Do you think that's smart of them to draft a quarterback that early?
I think it would be smart of them to draft a guy at some point. I'm not sure about necessarily this year. If you don't have the right guy, you don't have the right guy. I mean, look where you got Garoppolo. He wasn't a top 10 pick in the first round or anything. So if you got a diamond in the rough that you think you really have your eye on, I mean, the kid came from a smaller school, Eastern Illinois. I mean, he didn't have the kind of college career that would say next $140 million quarterback, but they found him anyway. So I don't think there's any reason to expend a big-time pick. You do still have Hoyer as backup. Obviously, he's not great, but he has the experience if you really need him. So expending a really high-value pick on who you think could be the next Garoppolo, I don't think is the smartest thing because Garoppolo wasn't anything special in the draft anyway. You got him as late as you did. So I think if they can get somebody, they can get somebody. But they also have some glaring defects they don't have depth at linebacker. They need some pass rushers to put next to Trey Flowers and Malcolm Brown. And honestly, they could use a cornerback. Gilmore is clearly not coming back. You have Cyrus Jones coming off of a year-long IR stint. You have no idea what's going to be next to Stephon Gilmore on the field. So they have other positions I think they should focus on.
We'll certainly try to keep up with the Patriots as best we can as the offseason continues going towards the NFL draft. Now we're going to transition to the team whose season is coming up quickly, the Boston Red Sox getting started spring training this coming week in Fort Myers, Florida, but still have one glaring issue from last year, and that's no power in the middle of that lineup. And it's been rumored for the past 2 or 3 months that JD Martinez was going to be the guy coming to Boston, but certainly does not seem to be going that way, as JD is apparently fed up with the way the Red Sox have offered his negotiations, despite being the only team that's offered him a multi-year contract, 5 years, $125 million. Do you think they should still continue to go after JD Martinez, or do you think they should try to go a different route? We've heard Logan Morrison's another option for the Red Sox in the last few days.
I'm not sure if Logan Morrison's a serious bet. I don't think the Edwin Encarnacion thing was a serious bet. I think it's just something to say, hey, look, JD, if you're not willing to take $125 million from a top-tier franchise in the MLB, then don't come here. We can always look somewhere else. And they're trying to bully him into taking this deal. Scott Boras is known for trying to get as much money as possible, but is JD Martinez really worth trying to kill your entire offseason and letting him strong-arm you into $180 million when, in reality, he's been a half-season kind of guy. It's the kind of guy that you would give $120 million to, not up to that $200 million. I think being fed up with being offered $125 million is a bit ridiculous. I think he's trying to play hardball. I think Dombrowski's trying to play hardball. But in reality, when it comes down to it, Dombrowski is going to be the one willing to walk away. He thinks that he's happy with the guys he has. He's just trying to add to it. I don't think he's going to really be bullied by JD Martinez.
And here's the thing, to compare Martinez with Logan Morrison and other players, JD's 30 years old, played 119 games last year, 45 homers and 104 RBIs in probably about missed 35, 40 games through the regular season. Logan Morrison had his best year to compare, 38 homers, but only hit 246 to compare with
Sounds a
JD
lot like
Martinez.
A lot of the power hitters the Sox actually employ as is.
Right. They take the home runs over the batting average.
Right.
My take on what they should do if they do not get JD Martinez, and this could come as a scorcher, but I think they should try to work with some of the guys in their minor league system. 2 guys in particular that we've heard a lot about, Bryce Brentz and one of the highly touted free agents from a few years ago who I think is finally starting to come around, Rusney Castillo. Had a pretty big year last year in AAA. Brentz had the bigger year of the two with homers and average, but I do think Castillo is starting to really find his groove in American ball. And Brentz is a guy that has proved that he can hit, and he's already on the 40-man roster. Castillo, they would have to make another move to add him to the 40-man roster. But I do think it's a move that they should consider taking if JD's going to hold out this long.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Rusney Castillo obviously is a flop as is. Even if he plays in the MLB for years to come, he's still going to be a flop because all the money they invested in him, and he still hasn't really seen an MLB field. Remember, there was that stretch where he first came up to the actual Red Sox organization and played at the MLB level. And I think at one point he had 9 hits over the course of 4 or 5 months, and they were all singles to the left side of the infield. He just didn't have it. Then last year in AAA ball, yeah, he hits 300 and he has some power, but I'm not sure if he's earned his way up to the MLB level again. I'm sure we can see him here and there, and maybe he'll get some at-bats, but I'm not sure that he's going to be a consistent guy, especially for that power spot. And look, I'm a big Hanley Ramirez fan. I think he could still be very good for this team at first base and DH. He's been working out a little bit differently in the offseason. I think he's regained some of his speed and agility versus that big, bulky power. And I think he could be part of the answer. And as far as Bryce Brentz goes, I like the kid, but he's very streaky. So, I mean, those are filler guys. I just don't see them being the long-term filler. The long-term filler would be if we got, back in the day, Mookie back, and if Benintendi continues to develop and Devers continues to develop. I just don't know if, looking in the system right now and you have one of the MLB Pipeline's top 100, I don't know if that's the spot to look.
Right, and I do think that I agree with you completely that Hanley can provide some sort of offense. I mean, he's 30 homer, 100 RBI guy 2 years ago, so he still has plenty of power in his bat. Just needs to get the average up a little bit, and then I think Red Sox fans will actually remember that he's a part of the team, and I think that's been forgotten for most of this offseason when they're signing Moreland and talking about Martinez, that they do have a capable DH already in their lineup, just had a really bad year last year and wasn't able to recover fully.
Right, and I mean, health obviously is a big thing too, because you're starting the season with potentially not Pedroia. You never know how long Hanley's going to take before he starts to deteriorate mid-season. Mitch Moreland had a couple of issues last year, and he's still getting older, obviously, as you go. Devers is a big body, and I'm a little bit worried about him long-term. Can he play an entire season at third base, taking that pounding? That's where, Brock Holt's going to come in to really give him a little bit of relief. He can step in the DH spot. I'm also kind of worried about the catcher position because health-wise, Christian Vasquez has missed time. Blake Swihart's trying to battle back to the MLB level, but who knows where he'll even play. And Sandy Leon is big. I mean, that guy is older, and he's a big body. I think health is going to play a big factor because if they had all their guys healthy for the entire season last year, I think they would have been in a much better spot. It just didn't happen that way.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk more about the Red Sox as they go through spring training and get ready for opening day in 2018. We'll be back right here on the New England Sports Report, talk about the Boston Celtics and the Boston Bruins, two of the hottest teams in their respective leagues, coming up right after this. Welcome back to the New England Sports Report right here on LCAT. Anthony Santaniello and Matt Durant talking all things New England sports. We covered the Patriots and Red Sox in our first couple of segments. Now on to two teams in season, the Boston Bruins and the Boston Celtics. And we'll start on the ice, Matt. And this Bruins team, really from the first 2 months of the season to now, just looks completely different than when they did at the beginning part of the season. And one of the main reasons has been, obviously, Bruce Cassidy doing a great job behind the bench, but Tuukka Rask has been spectacular ever since really mid to late November. He's been on one of the best tears I've ever seen from a goaltender, and he's the main reason why the Bruins
He's
are doing
been
so
spectacular.
Well.
Anton Khudobin has been very, very good as well, but at one point in November, I believe it was November 15th, they benched Tuukka Rask, and then all of a sudden he starts coming back, and now it's looking like he might be a non-all-star that becomes a Vezina winner. The guy is on fire. The problem is, can he get it through the stretch? Because he does have that issue when it comes playoff time occasionally where he's just not there anymore. But it helps that he has a lot of young guys in front of him that are just playing out of their minds. They're putting everything into it. Danton Heinen is a big surprise. They also have guys that look like veterans now that are still so young in David Pasternak and like Torrey Krug. Those two guys are playing like veterans even though they're still in their first couple of years. So I think a lot of it has to do is the fact that they're getting the playing time. Under Claude Julien, the young guys were never playing. They weren't given the time to develop. Now Bruce Cassidy's giving them a lot of time to develop, and I think they're injecting a ton of energy into this team.
And, I mean, you talk about the young guys. Pasternak, 51 points. Heinen, 38 points. Jake DeBrusk, 28 points. Charlie McAvoy, who had a fantastic coming on last season during the postseason, 25 points for him. And then the guys that they always depend on, Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand, are having two of the best seasons of their careers to provide veteran leadership. So the Bruins certainly headed in the right direction. And to say that they're the second-best team in the East is still kind of shocking given the run that they just went on. Second-best team in their division, even behind Tampa Bay, who leads the NHL in total points. And I think it's going to be tough for Boston to kind of overcome Tampa, given this great run they just had, and they're still behind them technically. I do think that it'll be tough for the Bruins to go into the playoffs as a 2 seed, have to play a 3 seed, and then have to play Tampa Bay, who will get an easier matchup in the first round. But I do think with the youth that they've had so far, it provides a lot of hope and a good outlook for the future.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this entire season is now you're playing with house money. I mean, you started the season and thought at best they were a playoff team, and now all of a sudden it's looking like they could be the President's Trophy winner. They could also go deep. If they end up in the East Finals, that's above expectations, above and beyond expectations. I mean, this team is made up of so many young guys. You thought maybe we can play well if we get good years out of Chara or Bergeron. Now you're getting great years out of Chara and Bergeron. And now the only glaring need is maybe a right wing for Krejci's line. Spooner's played well, but he's not that name that's going to get your team there. I mean, you look at a team like the Lightning, Steven Stamkos. I mean, they have that guy. They have the one guy. I'm not sure if the Bruins have that one guy, so I think they'll be buyers at the deadline. But like I said, they're playing with house money. Now they're looking for talent to add to their team so they can be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. When it looked like they might be selling for the future at the deadline because they weren't even going to make the playoffs. It's just an incredible season for a lot of young guys, and they don't seem like they're stopping anytime soon.
Final number from Tuukka Rask on this run he's had since November 26th when he lost his 4th game in a row. He's been, and fans were calling for him since then, 19-1-2 between the pipes, .940 save percentage, and just over 1.5 goals allowed per game. It's unbelievable what the Bruins net miners are doing. Now on to...
It's a little bit out of character, too, because for a long time he was a guy that would have a relatively low goals against average, but a pretty bad save percentage because he was getting peppered for the last couple of years and the defense was not playing as well. Now you have Chara and McAvoy having incredible years. Kevin Miller, Adam McQuaid, in and out, but they're still playing very well. Brandon Carlo, for certain times, has been one of your best defensive players on the ice, and Tuukka's getting an opportunity to save more pucks. So the numbers are getting better and better. I think he's gaining a ton of confidence. He's the kind of guy that feeds off of the confidence his team feeds him, which at times isn't the best thing. You don't want an emotional goalie. But for now, it seems like it's working.
So just about 2 months left in the regular season, and we'll see where the Bruins can end up as they go towards their postseason push. Another team making a good run in the Eastern Conference, the Boston Celtics on the hardwood, sitting second behind the Toronto Raptors in the Eastern Conference. 40-17 are the Celtics. Kyrie Irving leading the team at points with 24 per game. And then you have guys like Al Horford chipping in, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, all at 13-plus points per game. Team is really rolling, and I think one of the advantages they have is that their bench is deeper than almost any team in the league, running 9 guys deep at one point in the season and getting consistent numbers with very little drop-off from their bench to their starters.
Yeah, and what's impressive is that just a couple of days ago, before they had a couple guys get healthy and before Greg Monroe signed on, they had 7 guys on the bench for a game, and all of them were rookies. I mean, you're looking at Daniel Tice, Shemi Ojeleye, Gershon Yabusele, Terry Rozier. Marcus Smart was hurt, but he would have also been one of your younger guys. I mean, Terry Rozier took the team by charge. He took charge of the team, and really was able to lead them to a couple of wins when Kyrie was hurt, when they were at their least deep. And now they're getting deeper and deeper as time goes on. They played the other night, and they were able to bring Greg Monroe and Daniel Tice off the bench. I think that's the first time I've seen 2 guys over 6'9" on the court for the Celtics in years. They're just transforming every week, and it's great to see because all of them fit into Brad Stevens' system. So it's clear, it's evident that the system is what's working, not necessarily just the players, because you're feeding these guys in and out, and they're all winning.
And I think they if they had one problem, I would say it's that I've seen a number of games recently where they're trailing by 15, 20 points at times, and they're coming back from these games, but as you get into the playoffs, you really cannot afford to get behind as much as they do and as early and often as they do. So that's probably the one problem I see for them, and maybe the only other problem is how much more consistency are you going to get from Marcus Morris and Tice and Baines down low, where going into a playoff run, are they really guys that you can depend on when you need those minutes coming from your starters and your reserves to get good minutes down the stretch? And they don't have the playoff experience, I think is what the point I'm getting at, to really say those are three guys that we can definitely count on in the playoffs, but we'll see in the next couple months how they adjust and how the season wears on
and
them.
I guess there's rumors now that the Celtics obviously passed on the deadline, but they're talking about trying to sign some of the guys, or at least one of the guys that was being bought out. Joe Johnson just signed with the Rockets today, so he's off the table, but maybe a guy like Marco Bellinelli, someone that's going to give you a little bit of a boost off the bench. But also, I mean, what Danny Ainge basically said was a lot of guys were looking at Marcus Smart because he's the kind of guy that can win you playoff games. The teams that wanted to trade for him were teams that acknowledge how valuable he is in the playoffs. The Celtics also acknowledge that, so they kept him. Once he gets healthy, I think it's just like adding a guy at the trade deadline. You have a guy coming off injury who's now a little bit more motivated to prove himself, so he's going to be coming back into form. I think he's going to be pivotal for them down the stretch, adding energy off the bench. And I think everybody feeds off of him on the second unit, which is a guy like Marcus Morris, which is a guy like now Greg Monroe and Daniel Tice and Shemi Ojeleye. They all have a role, but they feed off the guards. So I think it comes down to Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart. Can they captain the second unit? And I think they can. They're both developing very, very quickly.
And you mentioned the NBA trade deadline. We'll come right back after this break and talk more about the big moves that were made all around the NBA by a ton of teams. The Cleveland Cavaliers obviously caught all the headlines. We'll get into all that right after this here on LCAT.
Looking for the latest news in East Long Meadow? Tune in to LCAT News Update for inside town government highlights, health updates, library programs, town events, recreation news, and much more. Stay updated with our team of LCAT reporters. For your convenience, we provide you what you need to know right at your fingertips. Head over to LCAT's YouTube channel at LCAT01028 or watch us on LCAT News Update on channel 191 and 193. Stay connected and informed with LCAT News Update.
Welcome back to the New England Sports Report right here on LCAT. Anthony Santaniello and Matt Durant breaking down our final segment, the NBA trade deadline, which came and went this past week. Cleveland Cavaliers were the big move makers at the deadline, shipping out basically half their roster and getting a couple of veteran athletic players in their lineup, George Hill, Rodney Hood, Jordan Clarkson, and Larry Nance Jr. From the Lakers, Kings, and Jazz in that trade. Matt, we're going to talk about all the teams that were involved in this. We'll start with Cleveland. What do you think this helped them with, and did it hurt them at all going towards the playoffs?
I think they pretty much stayed the exact same. I mean, your risk with Isaiah Thomas on the court is, at worst, he's going to give you about 15 points. He'll take a couple of shots, and maybe he'll be a bit of a defensive liability. You upgrade, or I don't think you even really upgrade with George Hill, who's had a really rough year in Sacramento. He's shooting at a high percentage, but his defense has fallen off a little bit as he's gotten a bit older. And even if he's shooting at a high percentage, he's only about a 9-point per game kind of guy. So I don't think he really got much better by going to George Hill from Isaiah Thomas. I think the biggest piece that they added was Rodney Hood. I think he's a very competent shooter. He's a kid that learns very quickly. He was learning a lot from playing alongside Gordon Hayward and Joe Ingles last year, and I think he'll be big. Jordan Clarkson could develop pretty quick, but I'm not sure Larry Nance gives them much. I think Larry Nance they already had him on Shumpert. If you want a guy that's going to pretty much only dunk and play a bit of defense, then you already had him. So I'm not sure if they got much better. I think they got more interesting, which is good for the fan base, but I'm not sure that they really improved all that much.
The thing that I see with Cleveland making these moves is I think they got a lot more athletic on all ends of the ball, going from Channing Frye to Larry Nance, and your guard play I think got a lot deeper because Clarkson was on a team in the Lakers where he would start some games, come off the bench in most games, but he's a very good shooter, high energy player that plays pretty good defense. You talked about Hill not playing good defense. I agree with you. And Hood, I think, is the guy that they can go along with Kyle Korver, where they can have a sharp shooter and a guy that is not afraid to take a three by any means. I do think they got a little bit better. I would still say that the East doesn't necessarily run through them. I think it's Toronto's to lose at this point, given everything that's happening. I think they're probably the most complete team right now going forward into the NBA playoffs. The Celtics are obviously right there too. But this move, I think, does help Cleveland a little bit in terms of getting younger, keeping pace with how the game's evolving here in 2018. For the Lakers, I think it's a very good move to clear out some cap space this season, give them the advantage to sign 2 max free agents this offseason if they wanted it, and they get a pick back in the first round with Cleveland's pick, which if you're in your opinion it doesn't work out, then the pick gets that much better for the Lakers.
Well, it's very strange. I think Magic Johnson needs to really just sit down and refocus himself, because you go with Lonzo Ball. Okay, he's the guard of the future. He's the point guard of the future. Now you trade for Isaiah Thomas, who, I mean, isn't the point guard of the future, might cause trouble in the locker room, especially if LeVar Ball's ever around, and he's a guy that needs to be on the court. You can't play him and Lonzo next to each other because they're both point guards. They're definitely both point guards. I don't think either of them can slot to the two. And then now, just a week ago, you have them saying that they're ramping up for the next free agent class with Kawhi and Klay Thompson. But now with these deals, okay, now you're back to getting ready for this next free agent class with LeBron and Paul George. I think they need to refocus themselves. I don't think they have a clear vision. And I think that with Kyle Kuzma developing and Julius Randle getting as good as he is, I think they have a big opportunity, but I just don't think they're ready to capitalize on it.
And for them, I think they made the smart move where if you had the rumor all season had been they're going to trade at least one of Clarkson, Nance, and Randall. And as someone, I mean, I'm sure people around the game would say that the smart move was to keep Julius Randle because I think he's the more developed player of the three. He's easily one that you could build your guards around, and he could play the 5 if you need him to. He's not that tall, but he's very physical.
Right.
And I think he's the right guy to keep in that situation. I do think it would be smart of them to keep him and sign him to another deal this offseason, even if it means you only get to keep one of those max free agents, because I think going after 2, you saw how long it took to develop with Oklahoma City and how they're still not really all the way there, and we're almost 3/4 of the way through the season. I think it's just tougher when you have to add 2 guys to a new lineup versus adding 1, where if you go after LeBron James, it's a lot easier for him to fit into a lineup versus getting LeBron James and Paul George, or Paul George and DeMarcus Cousins on one team.
Right, and that's the other thing, too, I think that was very important at the trade deadline, is that Anthony Davis didn't move.
Right.
Because that keys me into the fact that he knows he's sticking around for Boogie, because they were looking very, very strong. And if they're sticking around together, and they have Mirotic potentially playing like the biggest 3 in the entire league, that would be one of the strongest teams I've ever seen. And if you can re-sign Rondo, who's been having a really good passing season again, I think that would actually be a threat in the West, because there's such a crazy mismatch. You know, Mirotic, Boogie, and AD all sticking around to create this powerhouse of bigs. Very interesting what would happen in the West next year, especially if then you have a shakeup with the Lakers potentially signing guys. Who's OKC going to replace Paul George with if he goes to the Lakers? What are the Spurs going to do? Are the Clippers even going to make any moves to give Lou Williams and DeAndre Jordan a chance to compete at all? I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces in the West, but it's really interesting, and it starts with the Lakers, I think, because they are, like, I think, over time have been the golden standard for how to run an organization in the West. But the last couple of years, obviously, Golden State has set a new standard.
And now, as we wrap up the final segment here on the New England Sports Report, I'm going to ask you one question. Who do you think won and lost the trade deadline? And it can be a team that made a move, maybe didn't make a move, that should have made a move. Who do you think won and lost at this year's deadline?
I think the team that won would be the Golden State Warriors, because they just can keep doing what they're doing. And I guess you could put the Rockets in that category too. The teams that didn't do anything in the West because they just watched a bunch of things shake up, and I don't think they're scared at all. I think they're just keeping their head down, and they're going to keep chugging along. And all the other teams that are scrambling to add pieces, I don't think really made many moves at all to improve. And then I think the team that lost, honestly, is the Cavaliers as an organization, because now you're adding these guys that, if LeBron leaves you, are you telling me that your future is George Hill and Rodney Hood alongside still Tristan Thompson? I have no idea what the vision is for that organization. I think they lost out by not investing in young guys that they can keep extending And they even sent away a couple of picks, which I don't think is smart if you think that LeBron's going to leave you. I don't think they're in a good spot right now for the future.
And I think one team that I could count as a loser is Miami Heat. I mean, they're right there in the Eastern Conference. They're the fourth team in the conference. Didn't really make a move aside from getting D. Wade, who has been coming off the bench in Cleveland. I don't think he's a game changer for them necessarily at his age right now. I think there was a chance for them to make a move and maybe go after a 3 or 4 that could help them with Whiteside in the lineup. They already have Dragic, who's been very good all season, but they needed someone else that they could plug in there. And the winner, I agree with you. I think it's Golden State and Houston for just staying put, Houston making the minor move of adding Joe Johnson, a guy with a lot of playoff depth and very good in late game situations, can be a closer for them. I think they did a very good job at not risking anything, keeping where they are, and moving forward as they go into the Western Conference playoffs. And I think that's probably the matchup we're looking at for the Western Conference Finals.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that there's going to be a lot of interesting matchups in the West. Considering the lower tier teams are still very competitive. We even saw how much of a headache the Jazz gave the Warriors last year when they had Hayward,
right.
But now they have Donovan Mitchell. So you never know what they can do. And I think that the powerhouses in the West, the Warriors, the Rockets, the Thunder, I think they have a pretty easy path, but I think that they're overestimating how easy it's going to be. I think they're going to be given headaches down the stretch, and it'll be a fun postseason to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I can agree with that. Well, that'll do it for us here on the New England Sports Report for this episode. For Matt Durant, I'm Anthony Santaniello. We'll catch you next time.